Hello, welcome back if this is your second time, or maybe more times returning. This is my second video, so if you're returning right now, this is probably only your second video too, I would hope. And if you're new, hi, welcome. My name is Ray. I am a trans medical student. I use they, them pronouns or any neopronouns, and I am here to talk about actually my first suggestion that I got from one of my viewers on a topic they were interested about. Somebody in my survey, which is going to be linked in the description, had asked if I could cover chromosomes and color blindness without using gendered terms, which is awesome. I'd love to talk about it. It's so awesome that it's actually going to be 2 different videos because that's actually quite a big topic. So, I have some notes here, so if you see me looking down, that's what I'm consulting. Today, what I'd like to start with is talking about chromosomes, what they are, how we use them as people without using gendered terminology. So some content warnings for this video. I will be discussing the gender and sex binary, or at least how it's assumed to be binary, and maybe talking about some examples of that and why using binary terms to describe sex and gender is actually not really correct and not appropriate. And I'll also be discussing a little bit later intersex people and specifically violences against intersex people. And I'll be sure to warn again before I get in depth in those discussions. And if I forgot any content warnings or if I think of something in the middle of the video, I'll try to either content warn during the video and or put a description in the video. So with that said, let's get started on chromosomes and trying not to use just binary terms to describe it. So first off, if you're not really like me, a medical student or so knowledgeable about science, what are chromosomes? Basically, chromosomes are just bundles of DNA. Sometimes those bundles are more compact when we're not really using our DNA, but they can be a little bit less compact and we can unwind those bundles when we do want to use our DNA, which is quite actually efficient, right? It's nice to just have it compact and easily packaged and we only take it out when we need it. And you'll find chromosomes in all of our cells. And DNA, if you don't know what that is, that's just a code, basically, that's present within our bodies and in all of our cells, which basically tells our cells what they are, what they're supposed to be doing, but doesn't necessarily say who we are. It's the old nature versus nurture argument, where in nature, that's our DNA, it builds our bodies, it creates the things within our bodies, but our environment and our experiences are more impactful in who we become, right? Or at least that's what the common argument is, and I agree. So, with that basic knowledge set up, going back to chromosomes, normally we have 46 chromosomes in our body. I'll say normally because we will get into that you can have more or less. And those are 23 pairs of chromosomes. So they come in pairs, 46 individual, 23 paired up. 22 of those pairs are what's called autosomal chromosomes. They're just called that because of convention. They determine body stuff. And then there's one pair which traditionally have been called the sex chromosomes because those are the pairs that determine, among other things, basically how people's genitals develop and organs around the genitals. Of course, calling them the sex chromosomes is a bit problematic because they do have other genes involved in those chromosomes that actually aren't really related to the development of those organs. And of course, it's also been used to assign a sex at birth, even if that doesn't necessarily match what a person's gender identity is, which I'm going to get into that in a bit. But now we have our basic setup. Chromosomes, 46 of them. They build what our bodies look like, how our bodies function. they don't determine who we are necessarily. Now let's talk about a little bit of variations. So as I mentioned, you can sometimes have more chromosomes or less chromosomes than you're supposed to have. For example, there's a type of what's called a trisomy, which means that you have a third copy of one of your pairs of chromosomes. So if there's only supposed to be 2 copies, you get a third. One of the most common versions of this is trisomy 21, which is also known very commonly as Down syndrome. So that's where on the 21st chromosome pair, there's actually 3 copies of the chromosome 21, and that causes Down syndrome. There's also some intersex folks who might have another copy of, for instance, that 23rd pair, aka the sex chromosome pair. And they might have fewer copies. They might just have, for instance, the 2 most common versions of the 23rd pair of chromosomes are XX and XY. Some people have a single X. Some people have XXXY. So there's a whole lot of variation, lots of options. Yes, I think that's what I wanted to say about that. Speaking of intersex people, I did want to cover what does it mean to be intersex, and how do we also appropriately talk about that group of folks. So intersex folks, this is kind of a definition I've gotten from reading more about the community, as well as changing some of the problematic terms that we use in medicine and thinking about it in a less gendered way. So how I define intersex folks and how I think a lot of the community members define it is folks that have variations in their chromosomes, hormones, and body organs that differ from the traditional sex binary of XX or XY chromosomes, or even male and female terminology. So basically, all those processes internally, externally, that we typically associate with XX or XY folks, they may vary and differ in intersex folks. And there's a variety of ways that it can happen. There's no one way to be intersex, and it's not all that uncommon. Most estimates have found that intersex folks as a whole occur in our population about 1% to 2% of the time in births, which is about the same as people born with red hair. So really not all that uncommon at all. So intersex folks are actually proof that sex as a concept is not a binary thing, and we can also see this in other types of animals as well, not just humans. And what that means is there's not just 2 choices of either you are a person with XX chromosomes or XY chromosomes. You can have a wide variation, and it's okay. It's normal because it occurs not uncommonly, and you can live a very full life. You don't necessarily need any changes to your body. So this is where I'm going to get into some of the violence that has occurred against intersex people. So this is your mid-video content warning. If this is triggering for you, if you're not in a good place to hear about this discussion, this is a good place to pause the video. So why I bring up intersex people, besides the fact that they're so it's very necessary, they exist in our population, right? So we should talk about them. It's also important from a medical perspective because there has been this long history, and even currently as well, of healthcare providers doing unnecessary medical procedures, surgeries, or prescribing hormone replacement just to try to normalize the bodies of intersex people. Again, these are unnecessary procedures, and in fact, by the United Nations considers this a form of torture. Unfortunately, it still remains legal in many places, including the United States. And I will be sharing a couple of studies that have documented the some of the stories of intersex folks who have been subjected to these unnecessary medical procedures and the harm that it can cause. So I also just wanted to mention that if there are any healthcare providers out there watching these videos, or future parents perhaps, intersex youth are probably the most vulnerable population. These are procedures that are done without consent before kids can even be old enough to give consent. And even if there is consent, sometimes medical professionals will give inaccurate information to parents and to kids to convince them that this is the surgery that they need or the hormone replacement that they need. And that's just really not always, and often usually is not at all, the case. So just wanted to plug that. Hi! So, as you can see, this is a bit of an awkward transition, but I realized that my video that I recorded ended up being kind of long. So what I'm gonna do is break up this chromosome talk into 2 videos. So for that first part, if you think there's anything I missed, please let me know in the comments, or if you liked it also, you could let me know. If you didn't like it, something, anything, I love to hear from y'all. And I will be continuing this video in a second part in which I talk about the difference between sex and gender. So thanks for watching, and looking forward to uploading the second part.